Well, good afternoon. My name's Jay Waters. I'm with the American Wartime Experience. Today is Sunday, 7 November. We're on the sacred grounds of Arlington National Cemetery, and specifically the Military Women's Memorial. And ma'am, it's my pleasure to interview today and meet Miss Jean P. Moore. But I just said your name, but Miss Moore, why don't you introduce yourself to me and the camera, please?
Yes, I'm Jean, and by then I was known as Jean Porter.
Okay.
But now I'm Jean Porter Moore.
Okay. And ma'am, where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1920.
1920. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. And what conflict was going on in the United States during your as a younger woman?
Oh, World War II.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And thinking about your family, parents, father, grandfather, uncles, did you have other family members that had served in the military before you?
Yes, my father was in the Army Air Corps in World War I.
Okay. And thinking about December 7th, 1941, and the attack on Pearl Harbor, maybe tell us a little bit about that for you personally, where you were, what was going on, how you learned about it.
Oh, I remember it vividly. I was at a sorority meeting at the time. I was going to Northwestern University at night in Chicago, and I was at a sorority meeting, and somebody had the radio on, and that's when we heard the news, and it was just stunning.
Yeah.
It was, I can't tell you. However, I had intimations of war coming because prior to that period in my school, in my high school and my early days at Northwestern, there were people that were talking about the problems with Germany. And the high school I went to had a large Jewish population, so we heard an awful lot about the problems with the Jewish people in Germany.
Okay.
And I remember being very moved by it because these were my friends.
Sure. And was there a large German or Japanese population around you in the Chicago area then?
Well, yes, there was. There was a good-sized Japanese, but they were mostly attached to the universities.
Yeah.
I was near the University of Chicago.
Okay.
We lived near the University of Chicago, and there were a number of Japanese students there. Mhm.
And so you found out, as I recall too, December 7th, 1941 was a Sunday. So what happened like the next few days? Did school continue as normal, or what was the
We were just sort of like in a daze. My job things, my civilian job prospects changed, and I moved with a friend to Detroit, and we got into the defense industry. We worked for Garwood Industries. I was a precision inspector. And after a while, I left there and went to Florida to see a friend of mine who was in the Army, or was training for the Army Signal Corps. And of course, every time you went to the movies, it was the newsreels, about the war and everything. And it just so happened that the Coast Guard, Coast Guard was, main office was in Palm Beach area, which is where I was.
Okay.
So I went to the Coast Guard and decided I'd enroll. And they said that I was, with my qualifications, that I'd do better with the Navy. So I'll never forget. This is before air conditioning, and girls dressed, with high heels and skirt and gloves and hat. And we took a bus from West Palm Beach to Miami.
Wow.
The trouble, we get into Miami, and of course the naval station, recruitment office is miles away from the bus stop, and I had to hike that. I'll never.
Wow.
Anyway, the Navy accepted me, and they said that within 2 weeks they'd be sending my orders.
Okay.
So I went back to Florida, and I was too scared to give my notice to the job that I had, because I was afraid I needed the money. And, but then my orders came through, and we took it with a troop train, literally,
Yeah.
from West Palm Beach to Manhattan, and then I took the Lexington Avenue subway up to, I think it was Kingsbridge Station in the Bronx, which was a big thing where we were all processed, you might say.
Yeah.
And because at that time, the boot camp was at Hunter College in the Bronx. The Navy had taken over the college, and they'd also taken over a number of the large apartment buildings around there, which were turned into barracks. So we went through boot camp in barracks at Hunter, and we did the drills and learned about aircraft and all this sort of stuff. And then I was asked to stay on a ship's company, and I worked, and I was assigned to the captain's office. It was Captain Amsden, I remember. And I worked with a fellow by the name of Mindling, M-I-N-D-L-I-N-G, who had been an entertainment agent in New York. And
Well, can we go back for a couple seconds? So just when you were in Florida joining, this was in 1943, do you recollect?
yes,
And what time of year was it? Do you remember?
yeah, it was summer.
Summer.
Yeah.
That's the heat.
Yes, it was
Marching
a summer.
to, Summer of 43.
Yeah.
And you kind of answered it, but let me just ask you then specifically, what really drove you down, or what motivated you to first go to the Coast Guard and then ultimately the Navy? Why did you join?
You just felt you wanted to get in there. You just felt you wanted to get in there. Plus, privately, I wanted to get back north. I didn't like it down there at all.
Okay.
No, but it was so different in those days than it is now. You felt, maybe it was because of my experience at high school in Chicago, where I went to this high school that had a large Jewish population, but I was deeply affected by the stories I was hearing.
Right.
And then I think also I was the oldest child in the family, and there were no boys, and I just felt that I should serve.
Right. Well, because I know a lot of men were both joining and being drafted probably at this point, 1943.
Yes.
But from your perspective, were there a lot of other women joining, or were you kind of?
No, I didn't know anybody else.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know anybody else.
Okay.
I've always done different things in my family.
Good for you. And then when you did join ultimately the Navy and you started talking about the training, what were they originally training you to do? What were you going to do, or what did you think you were going to do?
What was I?
Well, when you joined, you mentioned like some maybe avionics they were training you on, or what?
No, they trained us, well, no, but we had to learn about battleships.
Battleships, okay.
Yes, and different kinds of aircraft and Navy terms like
Okay.
the head and the port, and I forgot the other direction.
Well, and from what I recall and remember, I mean, New York City was, as you said, both a training, but also there were a lot of ships coming and going, right? Troop ships and things. So maybe just describe the overall feeling in New York City in 1943 and 44.
It was very hospitable to people in the Navy, or people in uniform. It was wonderful. We had free tickets to so many wonderful events and things. I fell in love with New York City and resented the fact that I had to leave many years later.
Yes. Well, and so very hospitable, a lot of opportunities, and then maybe describe a little bit about where you're living. You were in an apartment or the college dorm?
No, I was living, as I said, the Navy took over large apartment
Okay.
buildings. And there was some that was a reserve for so-called boot camp, or the recruits. They stayed 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then were shipped out. I was not shipped out. I stayed on. But I had an apartment that I shared with 3 other women.
Okay.
And we became quite close
Yeah.
and did a lot of things together.
Okay. And these other the other women were in the service as well with you in the Navy?
Yes, I think they all came in roughly around the same time I did.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And how did you end up kind of switching? I understand you started doing stuff like for the entertainment and promotional activities. How did that come about?
Well, I think it had been due to it all started because the person I was assigned to work for, he had been an entertainment agent.
Okay.
And through him, as draft numbers would come up for what was then known as studio musicians. Remember, now this is before television.
Right.
And this is a time when radio had their own dance bands or their own entertainers and so on, but they would get guest artists. We got the cream of the crop of the musicians from the studio, some very well-known names, and they became the U.S. Navy Waves band.
Okay.
Then as girls would be interviewed when they arrived in the Bronx as to what talents they might have, they found out that some of them had music training. And so some of them would be selected, and they formed what amounted to the Waves singing platoon.
Okay.
They would only stay 2 weeks, and then the next group would come in, and there'll be another. So there was always a nucleus of them. And what we did, we would book those girls on commercial radio programs. We also would have our girl entertainers who'd been singers or dancers in civilian life, only about 4 of them. And the same thing with them. But they stayed with us through the whole period. What we did, the Navy band and the Wave Singing Platoon, we would either book them on radio shows, or we had our own show for which I wrote the script.
Okay.
And of course we would extol about how great it was to have women in the Navy and what they were doing, and we were releasing a man for active duty. And we would also sometimes the networks would do the show from Hunter College.
Okay.
And in that case, we would get the so-called stars. We had Eddie Cantor, we had Frank Sinatra, numbers that you wouldn't remember because you're not old enough.
Well, I've heard of Frank Sinatra.
But at that time, they were big stars in the entertainment world. And then we would also entertain at like Halloran General Hospital or the Brooklyn Naval Hospital, or else our group would be, as I said, booked into commercial shows. I remember there was what was the name of the show? I can't remember the name of it. But in those days, they had live music on radio. And so our group would either go down there too.
And a lot of it was promotional to get,
Yes, it was
to get women to join.
To give a better image of women in the service
Okay.
and how important we were to the war effort.
So not necessarily like, I've heard of the war bond efforts or getting women
No,
to join.
no,
Really?
no,
Okay. But
no.
I think you said one of the mottos was, for every woman that joins, it frees up a man.
Yes.
Okay. What did you like most about your duties and the things that you were doing? What did you like the most?
I liked it because I was busy all the time.
You were busy all the time? Okay. Well, and so like maybe if you could just describe a typical day, what your hours and where you actually went to work. with the?
Well,
with
it was
normal
easy
days?
because we were billeted right on the campus.
Yes,
Where the apartment buildings were, so we didn't have any commuting problems at
Okay.
all. And of course, we would have parades on the athletic field, and I was, as I mentioned earlier, I was in the drum and bugle corps.
yeah, that's right, you started
That was
talking about. Well,
fun.
tell us about that.
I don't know how come I got, if I volunteered, if I was recruited for that. Yes, I played the snare drums.
Okay,
I think it was.
you were voluntold.
Yes.
As they said.
And, and we had, we could cook if we wanted to in our apartments, but most of the time we went to the mess hall.
How was the chow? How was the food?
It was pretty good. It was
Yeah.
pretty good. We thrived.
Okay, thrived and survived.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I would assume you had a rank during all this, right? A military rank, naval rank?
Yes, yeoman first class.
Yeoman first class? Okay.
Yes, they put me, in. They put an order in for me to go to ensign, but it was right at the end of the war, so it was,
Yeah, and so ensign would be a
Yeah.
junior officer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so did you get promoted a few times
Yeah.
during your service?
I think I started out at yeoman first, and I remained yeoman first.
Okay, okay. And did you receive any awards or recognition
No.
during your time?
No.
Just work, work, work?
Uh-huh.
Well, you talked about the things that you liked. Was there anything that you didn't like about your duties and your time in the Navy?
No, I liked everything.
Okay,
I just did it, period.
just did it.
It was a job.
Sure,
Mm-hmm.
sure. And back to kind of this daily routine, were you working every day, 7 days a week to support the war effort, or did you get some time off now and again?
We would get leave where we could go downtown into Manhattan. And I think I also once got leave to go home, went to Chicago. I got a MATS flight home.
And what kind of flight is that?
And MATS, they were free. It was, the Navy planes were going out there anyway, so they took, if you were personnel, you could go.
Okay. And were you wearing your uniform even when
Yes,
you were off duty?
you wore your uniform all the time.
And that was everybody, right? Men,
Yes,
women?
yes,
just-
yes, everybody. Except the 4 women entertainers we had.
Okay.
They were allowed civilian clothes for entertainment only,
Sure.
when they were, singing or dancing.
And so in 1946, it looks like the war was now over and winding down.
Yes, well, so they closed Hunter College, and then they moved us down to Manhattan at a hotel at about 76th and Broadway. I think the hotel is gone now, but it became a separation center.
Okay.
Because in those days, to get out of the Navy, you had to have points and seniority, and I didn't have enough points or
Right.
seniority.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit how the point system worked?
I don't remember, but I do know that on seniority, you see, I came in, I was not the original group that came into the Navy. So I think the women in the service might have only been in existence for maybe a year before I joined.
Okay.
And I know originally boot camp was someplace else before they decided to have it at the Hunter College in the Bronx. But then so I was then transferred down to Manhattan, and I was a separation officer. I had to inform women of their rights and their benefits, like insurance and
Sure.
clothing allowance and all that when they got out.
And mainly for women? You were talking to women?
Oh, yes, just women, no men,
Okay.
no men.
And was this the start of what I normally call the GI Bill? Were there education benefits for
Yes,
separating folks?
that's what we had to talk about, the GI Bill, yes.
So insurance?
And insurance, and the clothing allowance, and I think and about the advantages of veterans associations, and what veterans associations were available to us.
And how did the women react to receiving this kind of information?
Oh, they were glad to get out.
Oh, they were glad to get out? Okay. Okay. And I meant to ask, when we were talking about that little bit of time off, what other things did you do in the New York City area when you had a little
Well,
bit of time off?
as I said earlier, New York was very hospitable to us, and we had free tickets to opera, to concerts, to plays. We went to fine restaurants that I never would have thought of going to before.
Yeah.
But somehow or other, the uniform was it was wonderful.
Okay. Well, so from,
And then all the stores, the famous department stores in New York, like Saks Fifth Avenue and a couple of others, had branches out at Hunter College for us, but it was
Okay.
nothing like going into the regular stores, in Manhattan.
do you recall how much money you were making a month?
No, I really don't remember. I don't remember. I think it was just barely enough to get by.
Yeah, but you were getting the food and the...
Yeah,
Yeah, and working very hard, as you said.
Yes.
Well, granted, New York never, thank goodness, never got attacked during World War II, and for the most part, the United States didn't get attacked, but I would imagine, you didn't know that at the time what was going to happen. So what was your, military preparedness and drills? Were you doing those kind of things? Was there a concern that, like a German submarine might come up into Manhattan, or?
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't know about all that until after I got out of the service.
Okay.
One reason is because the man I eventually married was in a volunteer he had a boat, and there were volunteer boat people that would patrol the Hudson
Okay.
and the East River.
So that was going on, but
Yeah, but I didn't know about that till well after the war.
And were there blackouts in New York? Was New York kept dark, or?
Not that I remember,
Oh, okay.
not that I remember.
And do you recall anything like, this might have been more for the civilians, but rationing or gas rationing?
No,
food
no,
rationing, cigarettes?
no, because after the war, I found out or heard about it, but we didn't have any problems like that at all.
Okay. Well, you talked about towards the end of your service, 1946, you didn't have enough seniority and points, but eventually you must have had enough, or they
Yes.
did let you out. So tell us a little bit about your personal transition.
You mean going from the service to the civilian?
Yes.
Well, while I was still at the separation center, just before I got out, a friend that I had known in the Navy, who was working for a big public relations firm in New York, called me and said that he knew of a job opening and would I be interested. It was working with a producer of a radio show called Borden County Fair. And what I was sort of like an assistant, well, actually it was a gopher, you might say, working for the producer, director.
Okay.
You go get this. But we had a live radio broadcast at the Maxine Elliott Theater on Saturdays in New York.
Oh, in New York, okay.
Yeah.
You stayed in New York?
Yeah, I stayed in New York.
Okay.
No, New York quite won me over, and Chicago wasn't big enough for me. I had to get back to New York. I did go home when I was immediately separated.
Okay.
And my mother made over my uniforms for me so that I would have something to start out with, even though we got a clothing allowance. I believe, as I remember, it was around $200.
Oh, wow. That's quite a bit of money.
Yes, it was in those days.
Yes.
To get started, but
Well, you were part of this unique piece of history then, too. So what was, you hear about VE Day, Victory in Europe and Victory in Japan Day.
Yes, yes.
You were in New York City when those
yes,
occurred.
I didn't go downtown
No.
with VE Day. I remember hearing about it, but Well, I don't think we could go downtown. We had to stay put.
You were working?
Yeah, uh-huh.
But I remember some like famous photos, Life
Yes.
magazine and things of the
Yes,
the sailor kissing the woman in the
Yes.
street and the parades. Did-
Yeah.
Did you see any of that
No,
stuff? No? Just, you were working, Miss Moore was
Yes, we're
was working hard.
Yes,
remember?
yes.
Okay, well then, you touched a little bit about your post-Navy career. Did you stay in New York, and what kind of things?
Yes,
did
I
you do?
stayed in New York. I worked for, I was working for Kenyon and Eckert, which was a big advertising agency.
Okay.
And their main, and the person I was working for produced and directed a show called Borden's County Fair. And it was transferred, in those days they would have summer replacement programs. So the program was transferred to Hollywood, so I was in Hollywood for about a year.
Okay,
But then the program was not renewed, and Borden's County Fair was not renewed. So I stayed in Hollywood for a while, but I did not like it, and I came back to New York.
okay. And somewhere along the way, you had met the gentleman who became your husband that was
Yes.
out with the ship. Maybe just tell us a little bit about that,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Well, he was the producer, director of this show.
Okay,
Yeah, uh-huh. And he had been a producer and director at Young and Rubicam for a long time, and then went with Kenyon and Eckert. These were two, in those days, things were different than they are now.
Okay.
With the entertainment.
well, I'm getting closer to the end than the beginning, as they say, but how do you think your wartime, those 3 or 4 years that you served in the Navy during World War II, how do you think that affected you for the rest of your life, the rest of your career?
Well, I got a lot out of that. It was a very, girls were not as sophisticated in those days as they are now. And for someone having left home to see what was out in the wide world, the Navy was a wonderful transition because it was still structured, but yet it was a different environment, totally different environment. And I had my heart set on New York since I was 5 years old anyway, because I had an uncle who was a rug buyer for Marshall Fields in Chicago, and he had gone to New York on a buying trip and sent me a postcard with the Empire State Building, and I said, I'm going there one of these days.
Huh.
So by hook or crook, I got there.
You got there, and you stayed. It sounds like you stayed there a long time.
Yes, I was there for a long time.
Okay.
Until, my husband and I decided to get married. We moved to Baltimore and then into Washington.
Okay, excellent. Well, looking ahead, whether you have kids or grandkids or great-grandchildren, but really like future generations of folks in this country, men or women, what would you want them to know about you personally and your career and your military time?
Well, I want them to know about how important it is for women to charge ahead and to take every opportunity that's available to them.
And would you encourage, if you were talking to a young woman later today out in the hallway and she was thinking about joining the military,
service, I don't know that I would be able to advise her because it's so different today. I think today it's more like any other job, except it's more regimented. No, my whole thing about women, because I grew up at the changing of the generations, born in 1920, that's when women got the vote. I wasn't aware of that, of course, as 1920 when I was born.
Sure.
But somehow or other, there was this dichotomy between your parents and what you sensed was coming forward. And I think we had a rough time. We didn't get things so much by actual promotion as by default. You would get a job and you would see what had to be done, and so then you got advanced.
Right.
But they didn't advance you in beginning. It was a battle. It was a battle.
Yeah. Would you do anything differently if you could go back in time and do it all again?
Well, I don't think I could because I was that person then.
Yeah.
You can't say today what you would have done then because of the other things, you know.
No, that's a good answer. Well, we're at the proverbial last question. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or revisit or that we didn't discuss?
No, but I appreciate the time I could have in service. I think it helped me more than I helped them. I really do. It opened my eyes to things that I wouldn't have had a chance to do before. I'll be forever grateful to that. And then for the opportunity for more education.
Sure. Well, you definitely put yourself out there, as you said, took a chance when a lot of women weren't doing what you chose to do. And you made a difference. You made a difference. Well, Ms. Moore, it's been a pleasure to have you and meet you this afternoon.
Well, I thank you very much. It's been pleasant to talk to you.
You're probably familiar with the military challenge coins that we have, or maybe you've seen these, but we'd like to present that to you in recognition of all your contributions, both to the Navy and to the nation, everything that you've done.
Oh, I really didn't do that much. I had a good time.
Maybe hold it up to the camera real quick if you'd like to. And like I said, it's been awesome. Maybe a little higher.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, you probably did a lot more than you think, and had an impact.
Well, it was a two-way street. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. It always is. It always is.
I learned a lot.